Somewhere along the way, happiness stopped being a feeling and became a commandment. It was once something that visited us, an experience fleeting and human that rose and fell with the rhythm of life. But in the modern world, happiness has been turned into an industry, a doctrine, an idol. We are told not simply to desire it, but to display it, constantly, publicly, and convincingly. Look around and you'll see the evidence everywhere. Smiling advertisements, curated lives on screens, the unspoken pressure to always be positive. The face must shine, the tone must be grateful, the words must sound inspired, even when the heart is quietly breaking. Sadness, once seen as part of the natural weather of the soul, has become a scandal. Carl Jung foresaw this long before the digital age. He warned that a culture that worships light will inevitably be haunted by its own shadow. By denying darkness, we condemn ourselves to live half a life. And that is precisely what has happened. We have confused denial with strength and numbness with peace. The cult of happiness is not about joy, it is about control. It demands that we maintain the illusion of perpetual brightness because genuine emotion, especially sorrow, threatens the social order of appearances. A sad person makes the happy ones uncomfortable. Their silence reveals the fragility of the entire performance. We have been taught to fear sadness as if it were contagious, a sign of weakness or failure. When someone admits despair, we rush to fix it, to offer advice, distraction, or motivational slogans. We do not listen, we disinfect. The goal is not to understand pain, but to erase it. But sadness is not a mistake. It is information. It tells us what has meaning, what has been lost, what must change. When we repress it in the name of happiness, we silence one of the deepest voices of the psyche. Jung called this kind of repression spiritual amputation, the cutting away of the parts of ourselves that make us human. And yet this is the age we live in, one where to be sad is to be suspicious, where to suffer is to be inconvenient. We hide our grief the way our ancestors hid their sins. We smile through loss, we post our resilience, we decorate our despair. The result is not happiness. It is emptiness disguised as optimism. The more we chase this artificial light, the darker our shadows become. The more we deny the night, the less we understand the stars. The tragedy of the cult of happiness is that it promises life without pain and delivers existence without depth. We trade the full spectrum of being for a single blinding tone, one that erases the texture of reality itself. But beneath the glittering surface, something stirs. You can feel it in the quiet discontent that seeps through the smiles, the exhaustion behind constant positivity, the quiet rebellion of the soul whispering, "I do not want to be happy, I want to be real." The world now speaks the language of false light. We call it motivation, self-improvement, productivity. But beneath the slogans, it is fear disguised as inspiration. Fear of slowing down, fear of silence, fear of anything that might expose how fragile this manufactured joy really is. We repeat affirmations like prayers, not because we believe them, but because we are terrified of what would surface if we stopped. The modern obsession with positivity is not born of strength, it is born of anxiety. It tells us, don't feel that, don't think that, don't look there. Every negative thought must be replaced, every discomfort immediately anesthetized by distraction, entertainment, or consumption. We are not encouraged to process pain, we are trained to outrun it. Jung wrote that what we resist persists. The more we flee from sadness, the more it deepens its hold. The unconscious does not tolerate censorship. When one emotion is forbidden, it finds another door. It returns as restlessness, numbness, addiction, or the vague sense that something essential is missing. Our constant brightness is a disguise for profound inner fatigue. We have built an empire of smiles over a foundation of unacknowledged grief. Scroll through the images of modern life, the curated vacations, the motivational captions, the rehearsed spontaneity, and you will see not happiness but performance. The world no longer asks how you are, it asks how you appear. And so, positivity becomes a prison. The rule is clear, you must sparkle or stay silent. To be honest about sadness is to break the unspoken contract of social media, of polite conversation, of the self-help culture that has turned human emotion into a brand. Even therapy in its most superficial forms has been commodified into a tool for optimization rather than transformation. We have mistaken emotional repression for emotional maturity. We call avoidance boundaries, denial mindset, and suppression self-control. But the psyche is not fooled. Beneath the polished calm, something keeps stirring. A pressure, a hum, a longing that refuses to be exiled. The shadow of positivity is despair. The more we insist on constant brightness, the more darkness accumulates in secret. Depression, anxiety, and emptiness rise not from sadness itself, but from the prohibition against feeling it. A culture that forbids sorrow ends up worshipping it in distorted form. Through crisis, chaos, and collapse, the soul, denied its right to mourn, finds other ways to weep. Jung would say that every emotion we repress becomes autonomous, gaining power in the unconscious until it forces its way to the surface. The sadness we refuse to acknowledge becomes the life we can no longer live. The forced smile becomes the face of quiet despair. And the tragedy is that no one intends this. Everyone is simply obeying the rule: be happy or disappear. We have forgotten that sadness is not the opposite of happiness. It is its depth. Without sorrow, joy is weightless, fleeting, and hollow. To live only in the light is to lose the meaning of illumination itself. The shadow of positivity is not the darkness we fear. It is the denial of the night that gives meaning today. The ego was never designed to suffer willingly. It clings to comfort as if pain were a personal failure. From childhood, we are taught that sadness must be fixed, not felt. That discomfort is an error in the system. So when sorrow comes, we do not welcome it. We barricade ourselves behind distractions, ambitions, and constant motion. Avoidance becomes the architecture of our identity. We build lives that keep us too busy to think, too entertained to feel. The mind, terrified of stillness, fills every empty space with noise. We run toward work, toward relationships, toward self-improvement. Anything that keeps us from sitting in the raw quiet of our own being. Carl Jung understood that this compulsive avoidance was not mere habit, but psychic defense. The ego's purpose is to preserve its image, and sorrow threatens that image more than anything else. Sadness reveals fragility, dependence, limitation, all the qualities the modern ego has been taught to despise. And so, rather than risk exposure, it hides behind performance and distraction. But what the ego calls survival, the soul calls exile, because every feeling avoided becomes a piece of life unfelt. Every pain denied becomes a part of you that cannot mature. The cost of avoidance is not just numbness, it is meaninglessness. Jung warned that nothing has a stronger influence on the psyche than the life it has not lived. When you avoid your sadness, you also avoid the parts of yourself that live through it. Compassion, depth, humility, love. These qualities do not grow in the light of constant comfort. They are born in the darkness of experience. Our culture confuses avoidance with healing. We glorify moving on before understanding what was lost. We praise resilience when what we mean is repression. We call the person who feels deeply too sensitive, and the one who feels nothing strong. But there is no strength in fleeing from life. The avoidance of pain is the avoidance of transformation. You can see this avoidance in everyday behavior. The person who jokes to hide sadness. The worker who never stops because silence would make him feel. The friend who always gives advice but never shares their own despair. Each one of these is a strategy, a mask against vulnerability. The ego believes that if it can stay in motion, it can outsmart suffering. But suffering does not need to chase you. It waits. It waits for the silence after the party, the pause between successes, the night when the mask slips and there is no one left to perform for. And when it comes, it doesn't punish you. It simply presents the bill for everything that has been postponed. Avoidance is seductive because it feels like control. You can plan your day, fill your schedule, curate your image. You can live decades without realizing that control is just another form of fear. But the unconscious keeps score. The sadness you bury does not vanish. It solidifies. And over time, the very life you were trying to protect begins to collapse under the weight of what was never felt. Real healing begins the moment you stop running. The moment you let the sadness sit beside you without trying to edit it. It does not ask for solutions. It asks for space. It wants to be seen, not fixed. Jung would say that the task is not to escape the darkness, but to learn to see within it. Avoidance blinds us. Attention restores vision. The truth is uncomfortable but simple. The parts of you that hurt are not enemies to overcome. They are invitations to become whole. There comes a moment when running no longer works. The distractions fade, the smiles tire, and the noise that once drowned out the ache begins to dissolve into silence. What remains is sorrow, naked, patient, unmovable. The very emotion you feared becomes the only thing honest enough to stay. It is in that stillness that sadness reveals its true nature, not as an enemy, but as a teacher. Jung saw sorrow as one of the soul's most essential instruments of growth. He wrote that there is no coming to consciousness without pain. Every descent into sadness is a call to depth, an invitation to see life not as a series of pleasant moments, but as a mystery that demands participation in its entirety. We misunderstand sadness because we live in a culture obsessed with progress. We think that pain must have a cure, that it is something to fix and move beyond. But sorrow is not an illness, it is an initiation. It strips away illusion, ego, and vanity until only truth remains. The wisdom of sorrow is its refusal to lie. It refuses the false promise that everything is fine. It confronts us with the reality of impermanence, loss, and limitation, truths that our happiness-obsessed culture cannot tolerate. Yet these truths are the foundation of real maturity. Only through accepting them do we learn compassion, humility, and reverence for life. When you allow yourself to feel sadness fully, something begins to soften inside you. The armor of control starts to loosen. You stop demanding that life always feel good and start asking what it means to feel real. The tears that come are not weakness. They are the cleansing of perception. You begin to see what actually matters. Jung believed that every emotion carries a symbolic message, sadness included. It is the psyche's way of signaling that something essential has been lost or ignored. It asks for reflection, not rejection. When you sit with your sorrow instead of escaping it, you start to uncover the layers of meaning beneath it. Love that was not expressed, longing that was not honored, truths that were not spoken. Sorrow, when accepted, transforms into insight. It teaches you that you are not in control of life, and that this lack of control is not a curse, but a doorway into humility. It reminds you that joy is not something to possess, but something that passes through you. It connects you to the shared fragility of all human beings. There is a strange dignity in sadness, a quiet authority that comes from facing what others deny. The person who has suffered consciously carries a depth that cannot be faked. They have seen the underside of existence and no longer need to pretend that the surface is enough. In this way, sorrow becomes wisdom. It refines the soul, grounding it in authenticity. It teaches you to love without illusion, to live without denial. It makes you real. Modern psychology often tries to measure well-being through happiness, but Jung would argue that the true sign of health is wholeness, the ability to contain both light and darkness without splitting apart. Sorrow is not the opposite of happiness. It is its foundation. Only the person who has faced their own sadness can experience joy without fear. To feel deeply, even when it hurts, is to be alive without anesthesia. And that, perhaps, is the beginning of true freedom. There is a point in sorrow where resistance ends. You stop asking when it will pass and begin to wonder what it wants to show you. The descent begins not with collapse but with surrender. The quiet decision to stop fighting what is already here. This is the threshold Jung called the night sea journey, the archetypal passage through darkness that every soul must take when its old identity no longer fits. The descent into sadness is not regression. It is initiation. It is the psyche turning inward, pulling your attention away from the noise of the world and back toward the depths from which meaning arises. At first, the descent feels like death. Everything familiar starts to dissolve. Ambition, certainty, even the illusion of control. You lose interest in the games that once gave you purpose. The world becomes distant, like a stage you no longer wish to perform on. What is actually happening is not destruction but purification. Sorrow is burning away everything that is false. In that darkness, the ego panics. It tries to climb back to the surface, to restore the old sense of identity. But the descent will not be rushed. It requires endurance, trust, and humility. There are no shortcuts, no affirmations that can bypass this terrain. The only way through is through. As you sink deeper, something remarkable begins to happen. The pain that once felt meaningless starts to reveal pattern and purpose. You begin to see how the things that broke you were also shaping you, how each loss carved space for something larger than the self you once defended. Jung said that the unconscious is not a pit of chaos but a field of potential. When we descend into sorrow, we enter that field. The images that emerge, dreams, intuitions, memories long buried, are not random. They are fragments of the psyche trying to reintegrate. Each tear, each ache, each silence becomes a bridge back to the parts of you that have been waiting in exile. This is why deep sadness can feel strangely sacred. Beneath the heaviness lies a strange clarity. You begin to recognize that what hurts most is what is most alive. The grief you carry is proof of love, of connection, of meaning. It is the soul reminding you that you are still capable of feeling and therefore still capable of transformation. The descent strips away your defenses until all that remains is presence. There is no audience here, no mask to maintain. Just you, the darkness and the quiet awareness that watches everything. That awareness, vast, patient, untouched, is what Jung called the self. It is the center that survives every loss, the consciousness that remains when identity collapses. In this depth, sadness turns into silence, and silence turns into insight. You realize that sorrow was never trying to destroy you. It was trying to return you to yourself. The descent is not about drowning in emotion, but about remembering that even in the deepest pain, there is something in you that cannot be broken. When you finally reach that still point at the bottom of the descent, you find not despair but gravity, a groundedness that comes from having faced what most people run from. You no longer seek to escape life's darkness. You have learned to see within it. And when you rise again, it is not as who you were, but as someone larger, someone who understands that sadness is not the end of meaning but its entrance. When you return from the depths, the light feels different. It is no longer the blinding brightness of denial but a softer, humbler illumination, one that knows the value of darkness. You begin to see that life was never meant to be divided into opposites, good or bad, joy or pain, light or shadow. It was meant to be whole. The descent into sorrow teaches you this balance. You understand now that joy without depth is shallow, and sorrow without meaning is despair. The two are not enemies, they are companions. Happiness gives color to life. Sadness gives it dimension. The heart expands only when it has been broken open by both. Jung often said that the light that we need most shines where we least want to look. What he meant was that illumination is born from integration, not avoidance. When you embrace your sadness, you reclaim the parts of your humanity that were exiled in the name of positivity. You begin to feel compassion for your own fragility, and with it, compassion for everyone else's. The balance of light and shadow is not a theory, it is a way of living. It means no longer chasing one half of life while running from the other. It means allowing yourself to feel joy without guilt and sorrow without shame. It means understanding that both are sacred because both are true. The person who has integrated sorrow moves differently through the world. They no longer demand constant happiness from themselves or from others. They do not turn away from suffering, theirs or anyone else's. They listen instead of fixing. They love without idealizing. They find peace not in perfection but in presence. And perhaps most importantly, they no longer confuse comfort with meaning. They understand that the purpose of life is not to feel good, but to feel fully. To participate in the total experience of being human. The world around them begins to change as well. When you stop fearing sadness, you stop fearing other people's pain. You stop offering hollow encouragements and start offering presence. You discover that empathy is not found in cheerfulness but in shared vulnerability. This is the balance the modern world has forgotten, a balance that Jung devoted his life to restoring. He saw that the human psyche is a self-regulating system. When one pole is overemphasized, the other emerges to restore equilibrium. Our culture's obsession with happiness has therefore called forth its opposite, a global wave of anxiety, depression, and existential exhaustion. The psyche is trying to balance itself. We do not heal by eliminating darkness, but by giving it a place within the light. To integrate sorrow is not to glorify suffering. It is to accept it as part of the design. When you make peace with sadness, it ceases to dominate you. It becomes a quiet wisdom, a depth of tone in the voice of the soul. From this integration arises a new kind of serenity. Not the fragile peace of denial, but the grounded peace of acceptance. You no longer need life to obey your idea of happiness. You understand that the storm and the sunlight belong to the same sky. This is what Jung meant by individuation, the reconciliation of opposites within the self. To carry light without rejecting shadow. To feel pain without losing joy. To live without pretending. When you reach this state, you realize that happiness was never meant to be constant. It was meant to move, to rise and fall, to come and go like breath. The real art is not to hold on to it, but to stay open whatever comes. Only then do you begin to experience what the modern world has forgotten, the quiet harmony of being whole. After sorrow has done its work, joy returns, but it is not the same joy you knew before. It no longer shouts. It does not glitter. It arrives quietly, like dawn through a window that no one bothered to close. You wake up and realize that you are breathing again, not because everything is fixed, but because everything finally feels real. This is the birth of authentic joy, not the thrill of escape, but the peace that comes from no longer needing to escape at all. It is not built on denial or distraction. It grows from truth, from the honest acceptance of life as it is, beautiful and broken, radiant and finite. Carl Jung said that the goal of life is not happiness but wholeness. And yet, once wholeness begins, a strange joy emerges on its own, the joy of being alive even when life hurts. It is a joy without opposite, because it does not depend on circumstances. It exists beneath both sorrow and delight, like the steady pulse beneath every emotion. Real joy does not erase sadness, it embraces it. It understands that grief and love are made of the same substance, that the heart that can break is also the heart that can expand. It knows that every moment of beauty is temporary, and that this impermanence is what makes it sacred. You begin to notice it in the smallest things. The smell of rain, the laughter of someone you love, the silence after tears. These simple moments carry more weight than the artificial highs that used to define happiness. They are not moments of performance, but of presence. Real joy is intimate with loss. It knows that every beginning carries an ending, and yet it says yes to life anyway. It is not afraid of the night because it has learned what the night contains. It no longer demands constant sunshine. It finds meaning in the clouds. When this kind of joy takes root, it transforms how you see others. You stop envying their smiles because you can see the sadness behind them, and you honor it. You understand that everyone is carrying both light and shadow, and that the depth of their pain is often the measure of their love. The joy born from sorrow is humble. It does not need to prove itself. It moves quietly through you, not as excitement but as gratitude. The soft awareness that being alive, even with all its imperfection, is an immense privilege. Jung would say that this is the moment when the psyche becomes balanced, when the conscious mind and the unconscious finally speak the same language. The soul is no longer at war with itself. Joy and sorrow coexist, and in that coexistence there is freedom. This kind of joy cannot be taught, it must be lived. It comes only after the collapse of illusions, after you have allowed the false happiness to die and have sat in the ashes long enough to see the truth glimmering beneath them. You no longer ask, "How can I be happy?" You ask, "How can I be honest?" And from that honesty, happiness returns, not as a goal, but as a companion. You realize then that joy was never lost. It was waiting beneath the surface, buried under the noise of pretending. It blooms again when you stop chasing it and start listening to life itself. Real joy is not an emotion. It is a state of participation, the quiet awareness that everything, even sorrow, belongs. If you have come this far, you already know that happiness, as the world sells it, is a beautiful lie. The truth is quieter and infinitely more alive. Real happiness does not sparkle under constant light. It breathes in rhythm with shadow. It moves through you when you stop pretending to be fine, when you stop measuring your life by how good it looks and start feeling how real it is. This is your invitation. Stop running from your sadness. Let it sit beside you. Listen to it. It will not destroy you, it will guide you. Every ache, every silence, every tear is a message written in the oldest language of the soul. Jung understood this when he said that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. To make the darkness conscious, that is your task. Not to escape sorrow, but to learn its shape, to see that within it lives meaning, memory, and love. Sadness is not the opposite of joy. It is the soil from which joy grows. If you deny it, you deny your own roots. You don't need to force positivity anymore. You don't need to smile when you want to cry. The world does not need another shining image of perfection. It needs people who are unafraid to be human. When you begin to live this way, your presence changes things. You stop infecting others with the pressure to be happy. You give them permission to breathe, to pause, to feel. You discover that authenticity heals not through advice, but through example. The moment you allow your own sorrow to exist, you make space for others to exist too. And something subtle happens then. Happiness returns. Not the frantic happiness of avoidance, but the calm joy of alignment. You begin to realize that nothing needs to be fixed for life to be beautiful. Even sadness, when seen clearly, has a kind of grace. Let this be your practice. Instead of asking, "How can I be happy?" ask, "What is life trying to teach me now?" Let that question replace every slogan, every false smile, every desperate chase for meaning. Because the lesson of sorrow is simple. You were never meant to be happy all the time. You were meant to be whole. If this reflection has spoken to something inside you, stay with it. Don't rush back into noise. Let the silence after these words become your teacher. Subscribe to the channel, not for entertainment, but for reminder. A reminder that depth still matters, that the human soul is still sacred, that it is still possible to live in a world obsessed with light and not forget the beauty of the dark. Leave a like only if something in you felt seen. Share it with someone who hides behind the mask of "I'm fine." They may need to hear that sadness is not a symptom. It is a sign of life. And when this video ends, don't move for a moment. Sit with yourself. Feel the weight of your own heart, not as a burden, but as proof that you are alive, awake, and capable of love. That is the truth the world is afraid of. That is the freedom hidden inside sorrow.